Hello and good afternoon. How is everybody today? Good to see you. Thanks everybody for stopping by. Hello Cam 1138. Good to see you. Good to see you. I am just hanging out today, having a fine old time. Well, I could be having a finer time. My stove is broke, but you know, these things happen. How are you guys? What's happening? I hope no major appliances are malfunctioning for y'all. Had a good live stream yesterday. We talked yesterday about DMing stuff. We talked about characters, and we got a lot into the matter of secondary skills. We also touched on magic users and how they get their starting spells. Hello, Katie. So yeah, lots of good info, I thought. Chris Kane, greetings. Ricky, hi. Lots of good information shared there. But leave us not dwell on the past. If you guys have any questions, though, all kidding aside, about about anything that we cover in previous live streams on the subject of learning how to AD&D, please, by all means, you can ask on the Discord, because yes, we have a Discord. For those of you who may not know, all one of you who may not know yet at this point, we have a Discord. Pop on over, subscribe, say hi. It's fun. We post memes and all kinds of stuff. So yeah. That's something fun you can do. And speaking of the channel, we are currently at 756 subscribers now. I'm very happy about that. We are creeping ever closer to that 1,000 subscriber goal. And you guys know what happens when we hit 1,000. So encourage your friends, family, and loved ones, anybody who's interested in role-playing games, to click that subscribe button, click that bell icon, leave a thumbs up on the videos you watch, and comments down below. Engage with me, darn you! But anyway. So I missed a question yesterday, and I felt so bad about this. Actually, I missed a question a couple of days ago on Wednesday. This is something Kyle and I were going to discuss. And this is less of a D&D question, more of a general fantasy kind of question. And this was Dan. This was my buddy Dan who asked this. He said, basically the question of why does Gandalf get to use a longsword came up. Is Gandalf not a magic user? And the answer simply is no. Gandalf is not a magic user. Gandalf is a Maiar. He is an angel. He is an archangel, in fact. However, if you wished to cast Gandalf into a role, if you will, for AD&D, it wouldn't be a character class. Gandalf would either be a Solar, a Planetar, or a Diva. I tend to lean towards Solar because he went toe-to-toe with a Balrog, which is statted out in AD&D. They're just called Type 6 demons. And did well. He died in the process, but Eru Iluvatar sent him back. So he destroyed one of his equals. Hello, Chris. Greetings to you. Yes, he destroyed one of his equals, won the day in a roundabout fashion, and was able to continue on until such time as he went to the Undying Lands with Frodo and Bilbo. But there is your answer to what Gandalf was. So if you're interested in playing a Lord of the Rings type game, don't simply try and stat up a magic user. Like, oh, he was a high-level magic user. Gandalf uses very few spells in the Lord of the Rings. And so that was part of the discussion over on the Discord too. Like, okay, what does he do? Well, he engages in psionic combat with Saruman and with the Balrog. He uses Wizard Lock. A couple of times he uses variations on Fireball and Flame Arrow. Or Fire Seeds, even. Continual Light. And really, that's just about it. Rallying people and keeping their morale up, and so on and etc. Oh, well, no. Neutralize poison and cure serious wounds or heal, along with similar spells being cast by Elrond after Frodo takes the Morgul knife to his shoulder blade in the end of the first half of the Fellowship of the Ring. And yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment, Cam. There aren't really magic users among the good guys. Even Saruman, I mean, if Tolkien had intended to have a plethora of spells available to the forces of good, Saruman would have employed them. But I mean, what did Saruman have? Well, he had the aforementioned psionics that he battled Gandalf with, and he had Charm Person. And really, that's it. Oh, and I missed some others. So, because another question came up, well, how did Gandalf get to, how was he able to talk to Shadowfax? Animal friendship, speak with animals. Yeah, very few overt spells. And I think someone asks I can't remember if it's in The Hobbit or if it's in The Lord of the Rings, but someone asks elves about magic spells, and they're a little bemused. They're like, well, we have what you might call magic, but, they're kind of common things to us. Guys, I'm going to have to ask you to wait for just literally 10 seconds while I get my fan over here. I'm burning up under these studio lights, so pardon me for just a second. Be right back. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Like I said, it's very warm under these studio lights, so Dan, I hope that answers your question, and it does lead nicely into the overall topic of DMing. It's a judgment call. There's a very early article in either the Strategic Review or the Dragon. I tend to think it's the Dragon. And it was written by, I think it was written by Rob Kuntz, because a lot of people accused Gary of basically creating D&D whole cloth out of the Lord of the Rings, and that's not true. A cursory glance should tell you that there's very little Lord of the Rings in D&D and AD&D. There's a whole lot of Conan, a whole lot of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and a bunch of Jack Vance, and then a bunch of stuff that Gary just invented all by himself. But Rob's article was Gandalf was a 5th level druid. And in The Hobbit, on the face of it, yeah, that's all Gandalf is. He doesn't cast really powerful spells. He doesn't display the angelic abilities he does in The Lord of the Rings. But that's Rob's take on it. You know, Gary invented Solars, and they showed up in the Monster Manual too. And if you look at them, I mean, that's everything Gandalf can do. But you might lean more towards the idea that, well, you know, Gandalf was just a mysterious magician who had a very tiny repertoire of spells and could use a longsword. The end. That's it. That's like your total view of Gandalf. Someone else, another DM, might say, well, no, I think he's a dual class paladin magic user based on this. And still another DM, myself included, might say, well, no, he's a Solar. He's a powerful archangel. I mean, he came back from the dead. You know, Chris says, I remember originally thinking Gary got elves wrong when I first started playing, mainly because they weren't really tall. Then a few years later, I read 3 Hearts and 3 Lions and some other stuff. Exactly. And that's, you know, again, they're Gary's elves. They're not Tolkien's elves. They're not Lieber's elves. They're not, you know, they're not Lord Dunsany's elves. They're Gygax's elves. But if you're looking to model things, as a DM, it is just a judgment call for you. If you want to perfectly model a setting or campaign world out of literature, it's really going to come down to your judgment call and what you think is best. There is, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and a lot of hay has been made about this in the recent years, which I don't get. But in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there is Appendix N. And we can take a look at that real quick. Remember when I said we'd be jumping around? This is part of the jumping around. So Appendix N, let's see. Inspirational and educational reading, and that's back on page 224. So do a little zoom in there. And I love this introductory paragraph here. Thank you, Halsey. Halsey's got the better part of it. And hello, thank you for joining our chat, my friend. When I was a kid, I realized it was cringe to describe non-D&D stuff like Lord of the Rings in D&D terms. I understood what plot device powers were even back then. Exactly. Even Andre Norton wrote the first Dungeons and Dragons novel ever. People think that it was the Dragonlance books or something, or even Gary's Gord the Rogue books. No, it was Andre Norton, Quagkeep, 1976. possibly even 1975. Even she, having written it based on Dungeons and Dragons, I mean, it is a meta plot book. You know how the D&D cartoon goes? That is how, more or less, Quag Keep goes. And I've talked about Quag Keep on the channel before, back a year or so ago. But even she didn't just stick with the D&D rules. She did in a lot of places, but not to the point that, you know, okay, it's over. You know, I'm out of spells. I can't do anything else. And there was one character. She had the ability to cast Hold Person once ever in her entire life. And I don't know if that was a misunderstanding on Andre Norton's part of how Fire and Forget spells work, or if she just wanted it that way. But again, that is a plot device power. And the book is written about D&D, and she introduced plot device powers. So let's look a little bit at Appendix N. It's a very, very lovely paragraph that introduces it to. I really like this paragraph. Inspiration for all of the fantasy work I've done stems directly from the love my father showed when I was a lad, for he spent many hours telling me stories he made up as he went along, tales of cloaked old men who could grant wishes, of magic rings and enchanted swords, or wicked sorcerers and dauntless swordsmen. Then, too, countless hundreds of comic books went down, and the long-gone EC ones certainly had their effect. Science fiction, fantasy, and horror movies were a big influence. In fact, all of us tend to get ample helpings of fantasy when we are very young, fairy tales such as those written by the Brothers Grimm and Andrew Lang. This often leads to reading books of mythology, paging through bestiaries, and consultation of compilations of the various myths of the myths of various lands and peoples. Upon such a base, I built my interest in fantasy, being an avid reader of all science fiction and fantasy literature since 1950. The following authors were of particular inspiration to me. In some cases, I cite specific works. In others, I simply recommend all their fantasy writing to you. From such sources, as well as just about any other imaginative writing or screenplay you will be able to pluck kernels from, grow the fruits of exciting campaigns. Good reading. And again, here's Poul Anderson, 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, The High Crusade, The Broken Sword. I would add A Midsummer's Tempest to that, or even Operation Chaos. Conjure Wife, although Conjure Wife may be Fritz Leiber. Oh well. John Bellairs, The Face in the Frost, Lee Brackett, Frederick Brown, Edgar Rice Burroughs, the Mars series, Venus series, Lynn Carter, the World's End series, L. Sprague de Camp, Lest Darkness Fall, The Fallible Fiend, etc. Et al., and others. L. Sprague de Camp and Harold Pratt, the Harold Shea series, Carnelian Cube, August Derleth, Lord Dunsany, Philip Jose Farmer, the World of Tears series, that's a good one. Gardner Fox, Kothar Kirik et al. Howard's Conan, of course. Sterling Lanier, Hero's Journey. Fritz Leiber, Fawford and Grey Mouser series, which wasn't complete yet when Gary was writing this. Fritz wrote more stuff. He wrote into the 80s. Or late 70s at least. H.P. Lovecraft. A. Merritt, Creep, Shadow, Creep, Moon Patrol, Dwellers in the Mirage, Michael Moorcock, Andre Norton, Andrew J. Offutt, Swords Against Darkness 3, Fletcher Pratt, Blue Star and others, Fred Saberhagen, That's right, kids. Mr. Berserker himself, Fred Saberhagen. I'm sure if the Book of Swords had started rolling out, Gary would have included that. Thank you, Chris, for correcting me on Conjure Wife. Margaret St. Clair, The Shadow People, Sign of the Larbies. Tolkien, J.R.R., The Hobbit, Ring Trilogy. Jack Vance, Eyes of the Overworld, The Dying Earth, and others. Stanley Weinbaum, Manly Wade Wellman, Jack Williamson, and Roger Zelazny. And then Gary lists the most immediate influences upon AD&D were probably DeCamp and Pratt, Robert E. Howard, Fritz Leiber, Jack Vance, H.P. Lovecraft, and A. Merritt. So these are things you should definitely consider including in your library. Now, the cult of Appendix N that seemed to spring up, I don't know, it seems like a little bit after Gary passed away and lasted until the late 20-teens. But it was kind of weird to watch people pick over this list like this was. If you're not familiar with the works of Salvador Dali, except you know the disintegration of the persistence of memory and the persistence of memory, the melting clocks picture, basically. Salvador Dali did a book which, based on its title and at first glance, you might think was an autobiography called The Life of Salvador Dali. Well, okay, that's what it says right on the cover, The Life of Salvador Dali. If you've ever looked at his paintings and said, what in the hell is that supposed to be about? The Life of Salvador Dali is a code book that explains the paintings. And so you can draw out the meanings, the deep meanings of some of Salvador Dali's most enigmatic works by reading The Life of Salvador Dali. He explains it. The Life of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is not what this list is. This is meant to be inspirational reading, just things that you might enjoy. And yet there's people who created a whole cottage industry based on, if we read the books in exactly the order they're listed in the Dungeon Master's Guide, we understand Dungeons and Dragons. Hey, Bo. And that's not true. That's the same kind of people that would ruin copies of Stairway to Heaven and the Beatles' Revolution 9 by running it backwards on their turntable, trying to hear hidden messages. These are just good stories. And whether you want to attempt to emulate these stories with the AD&D rules or you want to draw inspiration from them, that's entirely up to you. But don't look at Appendix N and think, oh man, I got to read all those books. I did when I was 13. I couldn't get my hands on more than, a tiny handful of them. Sadly, Bo, I think there may be some truth to that. And make your own Appendix N. Maybe your reading is The Lord of the Rings and a whole bunch of Dragonlance books. That's fine too. But don't get caught up on this list. Don't think that you're not a good DM if you don't come in here and read every one of these things. Look, I tried to get through some A.E. Merritt, okay? Because I thought, man, there'll be some good ideas in here. Wow, it is absolutely pulp fiction written in the 1930s. It is stultifyingly dull to me. Just, I had to read The Hobbit twice just to wash it out of my brain. There are others in this list that I discovered by dint of the list that I've fallen in love with. All of the Poul Anderson that I mentioned, the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser stories from Liber. So you may come away with a completely different view on how you want to run your D&D game based on reading this list. You may look at this list and think, all those books are shit. I want to play AD&D, but my influencers are drawn from this thing over here. And that's fine. Chris says, my kids have read some of them, but they understand it's all Gary's context and they are to take, digest, and invent them on their own. Then invent on their own. Exactly. Again, this is not some, Voynich manuscript that if you can divine where all of these books fit into AD&D, hey presto, you automatically understand AD&D. You understand AD&D by playing AD&D, by DMing AD&D, and by creating your own campaign worlds. These things show you how certain worlds can be built and how certain adventures can unfold. You might want to have a mountain climbing adventure. Like, why should the dungeon be spread out horizontally underground? What if it's vertical inside a mountain and the characters have to climb the mountain to get into it? Well, read Stardock by Fritz Leiber. It's Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. Hear that there are these fabulous gems to be found inside a dungeon in the mountain of Stardock. And so the story is about them braving the elements and climbing up Stardock and then finding a way in and having an adventure therein. And meeting a couple of hot chicks along the way. So, because that's what Fafhrd and Grey Mouser do. Maybe you want your characters to meet a couple of hot guys. You can do that too. But the point remains, don't feel like this is a homework. I'm never going to come in here and say, okay, guys, now I want you to read all of these books, all of these authors, all the books Gary lists. And if he just lists an author like Lee Brackett, you have to read everything Lee Brackett wrote. No, that's not it. Well, Cam, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree, because the Lankmar stories are wonderful. All right. So that's what we have to say about the influences of literature on D&D. Or at least first edition AD&D. It should be as influenced as much or as little as you want it to be. Don't feel tied down to single literary sources. It's not King Arthur. It's not The Lord of the Rings. It's not Conan. It's not Fafhrd and Grey Mouser. It's not John Carter of Mars. It's all of those and then some, and your imagination. I mean, Conan would go bonkers in Greyhawk. And Fafhrd and Grey Mouser probably a little less so, but the first time they, hacked their way or tricked their way, in the case of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, probably a bunch of orcs and found 3,000 pieces of gold, they die of a heart attack. They think they'd gone to heaven. They'd be lying on the floor making coin angels. So never think that Appendix N is marching orders for you, that you have to put things in your game just so. Don't ever think that, because that's not true. Your game is your game, and how you order it is entirely up to you. Essays are due whenever you want, Bo. All right, so let's delve in a little bit. I think the best way to divide our approach to the Dungeon Master's Guide is from the outside in. I want to talk to you guys about the adventure and then expand out to world building. Now, paradoxically, for the new DM, it is easier to start, just in my opinion, if you're going to build a whole world, if you're not going to play in a pre-generated campaign such as World of Greyhawk, that is funny, Halsey. Going in the horrible secret of deflation. Conan versus the Thing from the tax assessor's office. But if you start with just kind of a general idea, just sort of a brief sketch of what your campaign world is going to be like, or let's say you did get the World of I'm sorry, I blanked for a second. The World of Greyhawk set, which is very much a skeletal module. It's very much just a skeleton of what it could be once you flesh it out. The easiest approach to take as a new DM is just with one adventure or a series of adventures. Now, when I say adventure, I don't mean one session. Your adventure may be multiple sessions. But using that as a starting point and moving forward and just seeing how your world organically evolves. Kyle and I, many months ago, talked about populating world hexes. And we'll look at that as we get out of the dungeon, so to speak. But once you start moving outward from that point, you've got a lot more flexibility when you start randomly populating hexes in terms of building out your world than you would be if you figured out down to the brass buttons on the mayor of every township in your entire world. Because then if the player's like, we don't care about that, we're going to go over here, that they might start breaking things. I mean, think about it like this. If you were going to go camping, if Disney allowed you to put up a tent in Disney's park, well, you couldn't, because they don't. So you go into Disney and you're like, yeah, we're going to camp out here. We're going to put our feet up. And I know there's a restaurant over there that sells hot dogs and sandwiches for like $35 a piece. We're going to toast some marshmallows. We're going to set up a campfire. What do you mean we can't? Well, Disney has provided for everything. And they expect you to do nothing. You get weird looks if you take sandwiches into Disney. I don't even know if they allow you to take coolers in anymore, because they want you to follow their plan. On the flip side, if you go out to a national park, there's nothing. There might be a soda machine at the ranger station. Maybe a snack machine up there. But you gotta pack in everything you want to do and to eat. and then make a decision about what you want to go see. That's the DMing difference here. Your world just kind of grows organically as your characters adventure in it. And the adventure begins simply with the dungeon. So let's talk about the dungeon adventure. Now, a dungeon doesn't necessarily have to refer to a mazy bunch of hallways of 10 by 10 corridors with 8-foot wide doors to the left, to the right, and to the front. The occasional pit trap in the middle of the hallway, and you come in the entrance, and all the way at the back through all these quarters and everything is a big room with an orc chieftain in it, or an ogre, or a hill giant, or a dragon, or a demon, or whatever. You can certainly do that, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. But, got a little past where I wanted to go. Set aside the notion that a dungeon needs be just what I described. Those are fun places to adventure. But if that's not your initial approach, and that's not the primary way you want to take it. I mean, maybe your dungeon is a series of natural tunnels in a hillside, or on top of a mountain, or in an abandoned castle, or it's the sewers under a long forgotten town that has since been abandoned, and that sort of thing. Did I scroll? Yeah, I scrolled past where I wanted to be. However you order this, and whatever you elect to do as far as your adventure goes, eventually your characters, and initially I recommend for the excitement factor, once you get past, you all meet in a tavern and there's a mysterious looking guy in the corner with his feet up, hood pulled over his face, you can barely see him, or you're all guards on a caravan, or you all wake up in a prison ship. Eventually combat is going to happen. And the first time you kick it off in AD&D, it can be a glorious mess. Now, I want to pause right here, right now. AD&D combat is a mysterious thing. It's mysterious to me. There is a supplement written, and it actually did get some consideration by Gary late in his life when he didn't consider AD&D very much, and Rob Kuntz and others, called ADDICT. And I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's a combat table. Or a combat resolution system, I should say. It's not a table. It's a combat resolution system that explains how AD&D combat should work exactly, precisely, to the nth decimal point if you take all of the factors, all of the interpretations of the Dungeon Master's Guide into consideration. Is it precise? Yes. Is it accurate? In the author's opinion. I'm not going to denigrate their work. I'm not going to say that they did a bad job. Quite the contrary. They did a good job. It's something like 30 pages and has 300 footnotes in it. If you wish to seek out Addict and use it for your AD&D games and then come back and tell me I'm damn wrong about how I handle combat in AD&D, that's fine. I've been DMing for 40 years. Granted, with some time off here and again. But what I have intuited from the combat system in AD&D has worked. Nobody's ever flipped a table and said it's unfair. And with rare exception, no one has ever said, well, you're just plain doing it wrong. So the first thing you need to know about combat in AD&D is that a combat round is 1 minute long. During that minute, there's a lot of feints, sidesteps, movement, and so on and etc. that can happen. This goes a little bit into how hit points work. There's a very, very good period piece called The Duelists. And it stars David Carradine and is it Keith Carradine? I can't remember. But anyway, Harvey Keitel. And they both play a couple of French soldiers who hate each other, and they have these duels. And in one of the duels, they're dueling with cavalry sabers. They're these very, very, very heavy brass and steel swords. They're designed to unhorse men or break the legs of horses if you're unhorsed. Thank you, Awig. They duel with them in a barn. And during the course of the duel, they are literally both physically exhausted. We join the duel in media res, and they are panting and wheezing, and like one guy lunges at another and staggers halfway across the barn and just has to lean on a post for a second. And you would think, aha, it's an ample opportunity for his foe to come over and hack him in the spine and be done with him. No, because he's like panting and leaning against the wall. And that's just for a few minutes of fighting. What has this to do with hit points in AD&D? Taking damage in AD&D is a very abstract system. And you may go through an entire round, you think, that's a minute of fighting. My players are going to be fighting for 1 minute, and you're telling me that the party fighter hit the orc chieftain just one time with his sword? Well, no. Maybe in the course of that minute, he stabbed him a couple of times, nipped off the end of his ear, bashed him in the face with the pommel of his sword. And while he takes 3 points of damage, maybe the orc leader didn't hit him at all. Maybe he overextended and has a severe pull. You know, or is just, just plain bloody exhausted. He's wearing plate mail. His boots are filling up with sweat. You're underground. It's already hotter down there. So the AD&D combat round is a very abstract thing. And when you think in terms of, well, this person took 5 points of damage, so I guess one thrust did 5 points of damage, don't think of it that way. Think of it as a whole minute of feints and parries and sidesteps and jabs and thrusts and so on and etc. And what this helps from a DMing standpoint, not just in understanding how the combat round unfolds and how hit points work, is you're going to get that player, somebody new to AD&D, who wants to be Inigo Montoya, or they want to be Darth Maul, or Errol Flynn, or Indiana Jones. And so they're going to say, well, I want to do that thing that Mandy Patinkin did in The Princess Bride, where he grabs he grabs the handy convenient bar over a collapsed arch and does a gymnastic flip and flips back. There's a minute of combat going on. You don't have to crush your player's dreams by saying, no, you draw your sword, you hit the target once. Now, if they want to start talking about advantage dice and that sort of thing, this is AD&D. We don't do that here. So the idea that you're standing 2 feet from your opponent and you're smashing each other one time with your weapon in a round, you can let your players play around with the idea of a minute combat round. There are some concrete restrictions to it. Okay, they're not going to be running 30 feet backwards, and let's say a boots of striding and springing, and then running 30 feet forwards in the combat round. They and their foes are going to stay generally in the same area, dueling each other. But it's not just this staid stab, ow, stab, ow thing. So if a player comes to you and they talk about this cool dynamic thing they want to do, they want to jump up, they want to swing on a rope, and so on and etc., let them. You have an abstract minute of combat that's going on every round. If it increases their enjoyment in their mind's eye to say that they're swinging from a bar and, bashing the bad guy in the face with the hilt of their sword before they push him backwards and stab him in the liver, let them have that bit of description, It increases the fun for everybody. And as long as you're not handing out ridiculous bonuses and making people stop and make additional rolls and so on and etc. for that, it doesn't change a thing. It does not change a thing. Ricky's disagreeing with me about hotter underground. Well, I would point out the diamond and gold mines in South Africa, where towards the bottom of those mines, it gets up to nearly 150 degrees Fahrenheit. So, but then that's not something that really affects the game anyway. So let's break down the combat round in AD&D. Let me zoom this in a little bit here. And right there in the second paragraph, Gary says, hit points are not actually a measure of physical damage, by and large, as far as characters and some other creatures are concerned. The location of the hits and type of damage caused are not germane to them. In Supplement 2, Blackmore, Dave Arneson, filtered through Tim Kask, he had a really convoluted hit location system. And it wasn't just for people, it was for animals. And there's a percentage of your hit points based on what area you're talking, like an arm, what percentage of hit points is in your arm and what percentage of hit points is in your leg, and so on and etc. And so Gary points that out here, that the location of hits and the type of damage caused to them are not germane. While it's not true with respect to most monsters, it is neither necessary nor particularly useful. Lest some purist immediately object, consider the many charts and tables necessary to handle this sort of detail, and then think about how area effect spells would work. In like manner, consider all of the nasty things which face adventurers as the rules stand. Are crippling disabilities and yet more ways to meet instant death desirable in an open-ended episodic game where participants seek to identify with lovingly detailed and developed player character personae? Not likely. Certain death is as undesirable as a giveaway campaign. Combat. Now, let me stop there. Outside of combat, I want you to take that in for a second, guys. Certain death is as undesirable as a giveaway campaign. This notion was promulgated that if you were DMing AD&D, and this came up when 3rd edition rolled around, I noticed a lot. But if you were DMing AD&D, it's because you hated your players. You were out to get them. AD&D created killer DMs. No, those people had mental problems to begin with. Those people were antisocial to begin with, because right here, Gary backs up what I said. Or I guess I should say, I backed up what Gary said when I said, killing characters is easy. I can do it all day long. I can sit here and giggle like a demented mofo and have you guys keep rolling up characters and then just do a rocks fall, everybody dies. You've all got first level characters and a red dragon tromps out of the cave next to you and eats you all. I can do it all day long until people get pissed off and leave my table. The trick is keeping characters alive and keeping characters challenged and engaged. Killing off characters left, right, and center is ridiculous. And a combat system that goes into grotesque details of criticals and that sort of thing can very much be that. I mean, what is it? Kyle and I were talking about, was it RuneQuest or Rollmaster? I can't remember. But in a battle with 10,000 warriors, just based on sheer unavoidable statistics, were they all armed with great axes, 800 of them would decapitate themselves. 800! Imagine being a general and you're walking through ranks. 800 is a lot of people. And you're just walking along and there's all these decapitated guys. Well, what happened? Did the enemy break through our lines here? No, they just, cut their own heads off. Does that sound like fun to you? Because it doesn't to me. It's funny, but it's not particularly fun. Combat is a common pursuit in the vast majority of adventurers, and the participants in the campaign deserve a chance to exercise intelligent choice during such confrontations. Don't just throw waves of monsters at your party until they're dead, particularly if they're fleeing. Again, killing characters is easy. Keeping them alive is the challenge. As hit points dwindle, they can opt to break off the encounter and attempt to flee. With complex combat systems which stress so-called realism and feature hit locations, special damage, and so on, either this option is severely limited or the rules are highly slanted towards favoring the player characters at the expense of their opponents. Such rules as double damage and critical hits must cut both ways, in which case the life expectancy of player characters will be shortened considerably, or the monsters are being grossly misrepresented and unfairly treated by the system. I'm certain you can think of many other such rules. You had one job. Yeah, that is just it. So 1-minute rounds are devised to offer the maximum of choice with a minimum of complication. This allows the DM and the players the best of both worlds. The system assumes much activity during the course of each round. Envision, if you will, a fencing, boxing, or karate match. During the course of 1 minute, such competitions, there are numerous attacks which are unsuccessful, feints, maneuvering, and so forth. During a 1-minute melee round, many attacks are made, but some are mere feints, while some are blocked or parried. One, or possibly several, have the chance to actually score damage. For such chances, the dice are rolled, and if the 2-hit number is equaled or exceeded, the attack was successful, but otherwise it too was avoided, blocked, parried, or whatever. Damage scored to characters or to certain monsters is not is actually not substantially physical, a mere nick or scratch until the last handful of hit points are considered. It is a matter of wearing away the endurance, the luck, the magical protections. With respect to most monsters, such damage is, in fact, more physically substantial, although, as with adjustments in armor class rating for speed and agility, there are similar additions in hit points. So while a round of combat is not a continuous series of attacks, it is neither just a single blow and counter blow affair. The opponents spar and move, seeking the opportunity to engage when an opening in the enemy's guard presents itself. Exactly a way the DM has to show restraint. Okay. So running a little long on time here, and I want to get into the steps. Determine if both parties are surprised. This is done on a d6 roll. It is particularly onerous. We will look at the science of it next time. Determine distance, if unknown, between the parties. If both parties are unsurprised or equally surprised, determine initiative for that round. Determine the results of whatever actions are decided upon by the party with initiative. Avoid attempt to parlay, await action by the other party, discharge missiles or magic devices or turn undead, close to striking range or charge, set weapons against possible opponent charge, strike blows with weapons to kill or subdue, grapple or hold. Determine the results of whatever actions are decided upon by the party which lost initiative, per A through H above. Continue each melee round by determination of distance, initiative, and action until melee ends due to fleeing, inability to continue, or death of one or both parties. Right there, as we read it, it sounds pretty simple. And it can be pretty simple. It can be very simple. But if you overthink it, then it can kind of become a colossal pain in the ass. And you wind up with a set of rules that may or may not reflect, a desirable way to play the game. Now, surprise is a fairly simple affair to manage. This surprise is covered in the player's handbook, but the player's handbook chart is in error. There's a typo, but the methodology is the same. So we're going to look at surprise here. And it's a 2 in 6 chance for all parties concerned. That is, a 6-sided die is rolled with a 1 or 2 indicating surprise. Some monsters are more capable of surprising foes than the normal 2 in 6 probability, and some cannot be surprised, so they have a reduced possibility, 1 in 6, 1 in 8, etc. Each one of surprise equals 1 segment, 6 seconds, of time lost to the surprised party, and during the lost time, the surprising party can freely act to escape or attack or whatever. If both parties are surprised, then the effect is negated or reduced. And what this essentially means is, if you roll a d6 for the party and a d6 for the monsters, and both sides indicate a 1, both sides are surprised. Both sides are surprised for the exact same number of segments. So a 1 and a 1, surprise dice difference, no segments lost. Both sides just kind of, ha! But it's not necessary to say a minute goes by, another minute goes by. Well, a segment, 6 seconds, 6 segments pass, you do nothing. 6 more segments pass, you do nothing. If the difference is 1, then the loser loses a segment. Now, What's important about this is, for determination of spell casting, loosing arrows, movement, the time is a segment. For the determination of striking blows, treat it as a round. If Party A surprises Party B for 1 segment, and the magic user in Party A says, I'm going to cast this spell, but this spell takes 2 segments to cast, he won't cast it during the surprise segment, the surprise phase. It will go off after Party B gets over its surprise, which could change things. That's why casting times, as we discuss them in the player's handbook, are very important. But in that segment, if Party A is close enough to Party B, the fighters with their swords and daggers and maces and whatnot can spend that 6 segments beating the hell out of the surprised Party B. And if they're not, the guys with their cocked and loaded crossbows and their slings and their bows are standing back with a javelin in hand, they can loose a volley at Party B and potentially damage them. Or someone that, say, maybe had oil to hand can have that oil lit in that round and then, or in that segment, and then throw it in the next segment. And here's a handy table that explains who is surprised and on what die roll. And then there's some examples of it. Now, you guys remember Dex Table 1 back in the player's handbook? Your 18 Dex thief is never going to get surprised. Well, hardly ever going to get surprised. There may be a time as a DM when you're like, yeah, no, I'm sorry, your 18 Dex doesn't help you. You know, you were sound asleep on the floor of the cave, and the monster, you know, it flies along silently. So yeah, you're surprised. You don't know something's wrong until you feel this pain in your neck, and, you know, Count Vlad is leaning over you. You will be my servant. Dan over on Discord asking me, can I post a screen grab of Appendix N? And yes, I will. I will do that. And there are factors that can contribute to surprise. If monsters hear you coming, if the party is, you know, laughing and talking, and you know, they're 12 deep, like in the case of my Monday night game, and you know the magic user in the back are calling out to the fighters in front, keep an eye out for monsters. They're not making any effort to be quiet. And there's orcs waiting up on ledges in the tunnel. The orcs aren't going to be surprised by the party. The party sure is going to be surprised by the orcs. So just roll a die for the parties. Now, maybe it indicates no surprise for the party. And that might indicate that, you know, somebody glanced up at just the right minute, or an orc shifted and sent a cascade of pebbles down the ledge that he was waiting on. And then we get into distance. When encounters occur, if it's not a fixed encounter, I should point that out. If you design your dungeon room and you say, you know, the chieftain will be, you know, in his throne, and you know, he's got his you know, he's got his concubines leaning on him, and there's 2 guards near the door, and they, you know, inspect who walks in, and so on and etc. Don't use this. The distance. This is for meeting encounters. Specific, whether You say the monsters are patrolling the halls. It's not a wandering monster encounter. The party will run into this patrol, but when they take notice of them, you determine by this. And it's 1d6 plus 4. So it's 50 to 100 feet underground or 50 to 100 yards above ground. And you can modify it. Line of sight. Like, if you're both coming to a corner, perfect 90-degree corner, you're not going to see each other till you bump into each other, almost. If one part, and we go back to noise, if one party's making considerable noise, the distance is only going to be 10 to 40 feet, because the noisy party's probably not paying attention. Consider the area that your party is in. If both parties open a door that's, and Gary points out here, a 20 by 20 room, well, it's not possible to be 100 feet away from each other. You don't open the door and then rubber band back up to 100 feet. The sudden appearance of one party upon the other can due to any number of factors: teleportation, dimension door, other magical means, sliding down a chute, will cause distance similar to that found when the actual area is a factor. Surprise. It mentions surprise again. And then he talks about light. So, orcs can see perfectly fine underground without light. An adventuring party of almost all humans, they need light sources. Or even if they're not all humans, but they have their swords drawn and they're magical, they're glowing, the orcs are going to see them at a greater distance. So there's your first taste of how surprise and so on works. This starts, basically combat starts on page 61, understanding the combat rules. I strongly recommend between now and our next stream on Monday that you absolutely read up on combat, because guys, it is a little more, it's not much more complex, but it is a little more complex than roll initiative. Highest score goes first, and we're going to get into those details as we go. This is the science part of DMing that we're covering here. And I want to go over this, and we'll expand out in the art of world building and so on. But where this is going to lead us, is into the conclusion of the encounter and then larger adventures and the gathering of treasure and the awarding of experience points, where you're going to find out, just like I discussed several weeks ago, Dungeons & Dragons, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st edition, and I don't think any other edition does this, but it rewards good role-playing. It does have role-playing awards. People that say, I just give out experience points for role-playing. That's how you advance your character. Well, guess what, bucko? AD&D does it, and it does it better than you. So that's what I say to those people, the naysayers. So, before we wrap up, any questions at all? Anyway, so that one, to the one that says flying characters at level 1 on D&D is easy mode, I say flying goblins are a thing. They seldom appear because characters don't fly at level 1. Nice. And yes, the DM does have to show restraint. Trappers, mimics, lurkers above. All good examples of creatures that will get surprise on characters in the unawares. So if you have any comments or questions or anything, because we are tipping over an hour now, just follow us over in the Discord, and I'm gonna, you know what? Let me see if I can do this here real quick. Open up the snipping tool. I'm going to come over here. We're going to get that Appendix N list, and I'm going to put that up in the Discord. Now, one thing I found out, some of these books are actually kind of difficult to get. They're probably a little bit more common in the 60s and 70s, and, you know, Gary may... Well, I've got them on my bookshelf. They should surely still be available. I'm going to put this right in the Discord right now. Because I can do that. And we have a Discord. I will place this. So there it is. It's in the Discord. If you want to check out some inspirational reading, there's the list for you. So Monday, excuse me, I'm not surrendering to the camera. I'm just stretching. Monday, we are going to dig deeper into combat and the combat rounds and how certain things are resolved. We're going to, given enough time, we will talk about saving throws. One thing you'll note in the Dungeon Master's Guide, or you should note in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's not a lot of mention of weapons versus armor type. Yes, that's in the player's handbook, and yes, you're free to use it as a DM. It will slow your game down. It will slow your game right the heck down. So beware, says I. So that said, guys, have an absolutely wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. I'll be on Discord. You can reach out to me. I'll answer your questions as best I can. And yeah, have a swell weekend. Thank you all for sticking around. We're at 756 viewers. We're getting closer with the subscriber count every day to the con, guys. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. And I'll drop a couple short videos this weekend, okay? You guys have an absolutely lovely one. Thank you all for sticking around. Thank you all for being here. Peace, and I'll see you on Monday. Take care.